today. We didn't know what the turnout would be, so we are just thrilled that you're here, and it's so nice to see some familiar names. And if you feel comfortable sharing your screens, please feel free to do so. But I just want to do a quick introduction. I'm Beverly Calvo. I'm a department chair here at the University of Texas at El Paso for the Educational Psychology and Special Services Department, but I'm also the team lead for the UTEP side of the personnel retention grant that we have with Texas Health and Human Services. And today's session is a result of the ECI summit that we had back in March, and we gathered all the comments that we through the surveys, and you know that many of you had an interest in doing a deeper dive into each one.
So maybe it won't. Let me see.
You all had an interest in having a deeper understanding of the four retention strategies that we presented. So Sheryl has agreed to be with us today and to go into her empathy interviewing and just giving us a better sense of what this means and more practice. And we'll have time for you all to ask questions as well. And just a little background on Sheryl. She's a speech and language pathologist, and she's worked with schools as well as in medical settings. And she joined the Region 19 Service Center as the early childhood special ed specialist and project manager for speech therapists. And for the last 15 years, she's been involved with creating and implementing early intervention programs and really working closely with teachers in trying to improve outcomes for children, especially those that have challenging behaviors, language delays, and working with teachers with classroom management, establishing routines, and improving the outcomes for kids, right? And that's what we're all here for today. But through those years of practice, she's developed this model, which has really had an impact for all of us, I think, on how it is that we work together and how empathy interviews can really have an impact on how we do our work. And every time I ask the question, why, I think of you, Sheryl. Why are we here? Why do we do what we do? Which is something that I think we forget so easily when we get caught up in the day-to-day, struggles and challenges that we have, but something keeps us coming back. So Sheryl, thank you so much. Welcome. I'll let you take the stage from here on, and welcome to all of you again.
Dr. Calvo, so sorry, just before we get started, I'd love to introduce the pre-survey. I put the link in the chat. It's voluntary, but it's super helpful for our grant purposes to be able to see what folks are learning, and then also to get feedback for the future events in the series. The survey is completely anonymous, and there's no consent form this time. It's not part of research. It's just for our own feedback on this summer series. But because it's anonymous, I would love if everyone could please, in the chat, introduce, type your name, your program, and your current role, just so we can get a general idea of who's present today, and have that recorded in a separate place from the survey. But the survey, it's just 3 questions, 2 ratings questions, and then just one quick, what do you want to learn today? What do you want to get out of this workshop? Just very, very quick. And I'm sure you could do that while Sheryl's introducing the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bev. Thank you, Chris, so much. I'm really excited to be here and see you guys. I'm so happy to continue this conversation about empathy interviews. And one of the things I want to say before I share the Padlet, and we'll continue to put the link in the chat so you can either follow along in the Padlet or at least be able to utilize it after. I don't change the Padlets. They're always available to that particular audience. So that is your Padlet to use, whether you have an account or not. Even if you have a free account, you're always going to have access to that Padlet with all of the resources and information and what we discussed today. So I just want to start off by saying one of the reasons that I even dove into or found out about empathy interviews in working at Region 19, we have a particular position in our special education department called a liaison, a state liaison. And they do just that. They work between Texas Education Agency and the regions. And so what's interesting about their job is they have a whole why wrapped around how to just flip everything on its back and on its head when it comes to any policies, procedures, or things that people do connected to their job, especially in special education. And so they took design thinking from Stanford University, and a big portion of design thinking, what drives the ability to design something, is that it's surrounded by a person's unmet need or a group of people's unmet need. And the way that they gather that information is through these empathy interviews. So you're gonna have a lot of resources about that. And then of course, once it landed in my lap and in my universe, and I decided this is something I need to do, instead of assuming that early childhood teachers needed to know about any pre-reading information, or maybe they need to know more about behavior and classroom management when it comes to routines. And so I throw all this workshops out there, and then I get 5 people and I'm like, what's going on? Like, I have all these people that I think need this information. And when I realized that I needed to take a step back and find out what it is that they're telling us through their stories, then I can land on what's going to be more interesting to them, more motivating for them, and what it is they're truly going to invest their time, because time is so precious, right? And through COVID, it became even more apparent that we needed to listen to each other. And kind of what Bev was talking about earlier, I'm finding more and more as I go out and work to support, whether it's a speech language pathologist or an assistant or a classroom teacher, a paraprofessional or a family, that we're also focused on our what and how. Just what do we need to do? What's that timeline going to look like? And then how am I going to get this done? And then the end of the day, you're just thinking, okay, I checked everything off my list, and then we start all over again. And we have gotten farther and farther and farther from our why. And that's the passion. That's what fulfills us. That's what gives us that gas back in our tank to move forward, even though gas is super expensive right now, but that's a different workshop. And so what I really want to do is get you guys into this process and understanding. It is something that I have been presenting to people because they have interest, and I hear the feedback. I'm hearing you when you say, but Sheryl, I'm really nervous about diving into somebody's story, and I don't know if I hear their unmet need, what if I can't match it? You're going to be very surprised at how, when you have to pivot and shift your mindset and your focus on what it is they're telling us, then you gain something from it and you get closer to your why. So being able to increase your listening skills is going to be huge. So I understand the apprehension. I understand what it's like to feel vulnerable, not just telling a story, but more importantly, listening. Listening's like one of the most difficult things to do, and yet we're expected to do it all the time. And one of the most interesting things about listening is that we're not born to listen, we're born to hear. And there's actually stages to listening. And so this is something we have to constantly focus on and remember. What is it? What is it really going to feel like to listen? So as we move through this today, I want you to also focus on your feelings. And I'm not talking kumbaya feelings. I am talking about, what does it look and feel like when I'm really listening, and what it is that I'm landing on. And I'm going to really dive into what is it that we're focusing on. So that gives you a little bit of an overview, a little history of why I use it, and just a quick story on what really connected me to this process. I had gone out to a campus, and the call was from the director, and it was stated to me in this fashion. Sheryl, I have a teacher, she's given up. She no longer wants to work with her students. Here it is, February, and I'm concerned, and she has a student that's out of control. You've never met a student like this before, and she's no longer able to make a connection. And I'm worried about how we're going to help this student. So I went out with the impression that I was going to be working with a student, and I observed for about 45 minutes, and about 2 minutes into my observation, I realized this had nothing to do with the student and everything to do with the adult. And I saw her so disconnected from her why and so focused on what to do and how. And I have to tell you that 3-year-old caught on to it very quickly. And so I pulled the teacher aside and started my empathy interview process and just asked a very simple open-ended question. And as I was moving her into another room to do this, the director followed us with her laptop and all her work and her phone, and she moved her remote office into this empathy interview that's supposed to be a safe space, by the way, and we'll talk about that, and wanted to listen in and thought, well, I just need to hear this firsthand. What is going on? I thought we were going to plan, and she immediately went into planning mode. Okay, so what are we going to do for this kid? How are we going to talk to the families? What's the next step? What's Monday going to look like? And so I told her, I said, well, I really right now just want to try something. Do you mind if I do an empathy interview? And of course, her eyebrows told me she had no idea what I just said. And so she was very curious. And so I explained to her, I just want to talk. And I had to do this in front of the teacher. It was on the fly, and it worked out for the best. And it was very transparent. And I said, I just want to find out what your teacher's unmet need is. Like, what is it that's not happening? Why is she not connecting to her every day? And even the teacher was like, what are you talking about? I'm here, I'm present, I'm working. I laminated everything on Wednesday. I'm ready for Monday. And so as I started to just ask my simple one open-ended question, I just asked her simply, tell me about a successful day. And I have to tell you, it took her a very long time to answer that question. And she attempted to give me responses based on what she thought, 1, her boss wanted to hear, 2, what she thought a stranger me wanted to hear, and 3, what she really thought needed to happen. And it took a while, and all I did was prompt, tell me more about that. Tell me what that looked like. How did that make you feel? And as we really started to dive into it, I saw little by little, the director shut her laptop, turn her phone around, and next thing you know, she's running out of the room to get a box of Kleenex, because the teacher has now taken that story. And I asked her about a feel-good story. Tell me about a successful day. And most feel-good stories start off with tragedy, difficulty, something, you have a barrier, a mountain, and it feels good because the end result is accomplishment. And it took her a long time to get to that. It's like she couldn't remember a successful day. And as the director walked out, the teacher and I landed on structure, the word structure, and we circled it and wrote it and circled it. And then as the director walked back in, we both crossed out structure, and she had an opportunity to talk about, I just need the freedom to connect with my students again. And I want to know what it is they need. And I can't do it because I'm so focused on this new program or this new way of setting up the room and all the hows and the whats. And so through that, the director realized it had nothing to do with the student. It had everything to do with empowering this teacher to do what she did best, work on her instinct and develop a relationship with her job, herself, and more importantly, the students in front of her. And through that, we were able to plan and develop by giving her the freedom to be flexible and pivot throughout the day and not have to use what was laminated on Wednesday. That was okay. And just giving her that permission, and the director seeing how that came. You can imagine I've done quite a few empathy interviews with her. her staff since then, and in fact trained her entire department based on the process I'm going to give you guys today. So through that one moment, that's all it takes. And it was super brave of her, super crazy of me, and super eye-opening for the director. So I hope that you get just a feel and also a glance at your future when you use this. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to be looking at the Padlet that's in the chat, so you can have that link. So what we want to do is talk about that storytelling process, and we want to start to listen. So living really is through listening. It's gaining information, and we want to do it and learn from it. So the only way we're going to learn something new is by listening. All right, so do we agree with that? Yes, I hope. So I have given you, and I gave it to you before, a quick 20-minute. I love this video. If you've never seen it, please go back and listen to it. Brene Brown does on vulnerability. And it is essential, and it's a great foundation for you when you start to say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do this with this one staff member or this group. And I'm going to listen first to what Brene Brown has to say about vulnerability, because it's super important that we're in touch with our vulnerability and those of others, so that we can have that empathy piece, that true empathy piece that's needed for this. So please go back and watch and listen to that. So we're going to talk about telling our stories. So quickly in the chat, I just want you to tell me, what do you think a story has? And just give me 2 elements of a story, whatever it comes to mind, no wrong answers. 2 elements of a story, 2 parts of a story, 2 reasons for a story, whatever an element means to you. What do you first think about? Those 2 parts of a story. And then if Chris or Bev doesn't mind reading some of those chats, that'll help me. I appreciate it.
Well, I will then.
Yeah,
I
I'm
see
sorry.
plot, ending, root cause, climax, beginning and end.
Love it.
I love it when stories have a point at the end, personally.
Good, yeah.
Protagonist.
Conflict,
Ooh,
introductions and conclusions.
love it.
See some former English teachers, maybe.
Very good. So that starts to give us an idea, and I know there's going to be more, and we'll go back and hit some of those. But what's really important about that is the first thing we need to think about is, what is a story? It has so much to it. So I'm going to ask you, is a story a conversation? Yes or no? Is a story a conversation? And it's going to be interesting. And yes, it is a trick question. I have to mess with your brain cells today. I just do. I'm going to rearrange a few of them.
Yes. Not usually, but it can. Yes, sometimes. Should be.
All right. So I'm going to tell you the answer is no. A story is not a conversation. So this question, how do we get people to tell their stories? We do it by listening and not being involved, influencing, or developing or staging their story. So it's not a conversation. When we have an opportunity to tell a story, we may have conversations after or even before when we preview. But during a story, it's time to be able to listen. And so how do we get people to tell their stories? We prepare ourselves to be the listeners that they deserve. And a lot of times what we do during people's stories is we interject our own path, our own story, our own bias. We start to ask questions that moves them away from their story. we finish their sentences, and they never have an opportunity to add all the elements that you have chatted. We never get to the end, or we never give them a good middle. They don't get to talk about the setting or the protagonist or what the conflict was. We start to develop their stories, and we only listen to the parts we want to hear, take from it what we need, and stop the story. So story time is never a conversation. Ask any kinder teacher who goes to grab a book off the shelf and grab all of her students onto carpet time. This is not the time to talk about your dog Spot at home and what he did on, Sunday. This is the time to listen and give the story its due. So it's really important that if we want to get into this process, that we truly understand it's not time for conversation. We've already had the conversations. That's why we're at this point. We're wondering, what can we do different? How can I make a connection? What is it that I need to gain from this story, which we're going to start to develop? So we have to already be in the mindset that story time is just that. It's an opportunity for one person to tell their story, and you, being the interviewer, be the person who listens to the story. So don't drive their car, don't haul their things on your train. So it's not your story. So at this time in the chat, I just want everybody's very quick first thought about, what do you think about a story not being a conversation? What connection are you making to that right now? Do you see that it connects you to how you're going to get somebody to tell a story?
Agreed. When you jump in, it stops, and now I have to go back to the chats because they're moving very quickly.
Just listen. Say what's important to them.
Important to remember that it's not a conversation. There's motivation for the speaker in your silence.
Yes. Very good. Thank you. All right. So I've given you your first article, The Purpose of an Empathy Interview, and this comes from an IT or an IT department, right? A technology department. And so it's super interesting how they made a connection, because here's the thing about IT, it's everywhere. We're all a consumer of IT in some way, shape, or form, right? We all have some sort of IT. We're all doing it right now. We are a consumer of IT. So here is this big technology industry who's also taken a step back and said, maybe we need to find out if the user's happy with the product. And maybe we need to find out what it is they really need and what is their unmet needs, right? So what is it that we can make a connection? So through this, what I did is taken out some of the information from this article and applied it to us. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to have you guys answer these first 4 questions. I know it's kind of hard in chat. So I don't know, Bev, if we could make a couple of breakout sessions.
Sure.
Okay, great. So what we'll do is put you guys in groups, smaller groups, and I want you guys as a group to answer these 4 questions. And we'll give you guys maybe about 5-6 minutes. And then come to a consensus. So if you're a group of, I don't know how many people we are, but maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 people, maybe land on one answer. Okay, yeah. So maybe land on one answer for each of these. And then we're going to come back and kind of dive into them, so that way we can start working on that planning process. But this is the pre-planning. So we've got to start wrapping our head around what is that we're going to use this tool for, and what is it really going to mean to us with our staff. So let me find out if there's any clarifying questions as we develop the breakout rooms. So please unmute if you have any clarifying questions about what we're about to do. Okay, awesome. So then what I'm going to do is choose a couple of people to just very quickly tell me what you thought you heard that we're going to be doing. So I'm going to ask, let's see, I've got Robin Harbert. Yeah, can you unmute and tell me a little bit about what you think we're going to do when we go into the break? I would just want to see if we. I don't know if you're unmuted. I'm so sorry, I wasn't able to hear you. Yeah, I don't know either. I read eyebrows, but not lips. I don't know. I'm gonna. I'm so sorry, Robin. Maybe if somebody else doesn't mind unmuting, I'm sorry, Robin. I don't know why I can't hear you. I could get just maybe one person to unmute and just give me a little summary of what we're going to be doing in those breakout rooms.
If I understand it correctly, we're going to be going into breakout sessions and answering these 4 questions with each other and kind of having a discussion about these 4 questions.
Very nice. Thank you so much. And then you're going to come back and have one answer for each that's a consensus together. So thank you so much. So we're ready if everybody wants to go, or if the breakout rooms are ready.
I reached out to Angie. Oh, there we go. Okay.
So you should be able to join now. I don't know if the participants that are left in the room, if you found an opportunity to join your breakout room, but let us know so we can get you into those rooms.
Sheryl, is 10 minutes about right?
Yeah, or even a little less. I don't think it'll
Okay.
take that long. So that's perfect. Maybe you don't mind like jumping into 1 or 2 of the breakout rooms and checking, and think like in about 4 or 5 minutes and see.
Yes.
That'll be perfect. Thanks. I'm not sure if maybe they just, we have some people left, so I don't know if they just didn't get into a room.
They must have stepped away or.
Yeah. Did you have your first class last night, Chris?
I did Monday and Wednesday.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're on those days. How did it go?
It was good. Yeah. It's just my class is pretty small. There's 11. So
Okay, nice.
it's a really, really great size. Because it's not too small that it's awkward, but
Yeah.
not too big that there's a ton of grading.
Lucky. Yeah, I had
Your class is pretty big, right? It's got
Yeah,
a lot of the
I think
alternative certifications.
Yeah, I think about 18 or 19. I had quite a few out, but I think one particular student, he reached out and said they were all at a conference. There was like a group of them at a conference, and I was like, don't worry, we'll figure it out. I'll have you guys do some stuff. But I had my first class last night. It was a lot of fun.
Good.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot.
I can't find out who our Pearson rep is to get a free textbook for you. It's a new person.
Oh, is it?
So I apologize for that. But if you ever wanted to stop by my office, I can give you the ones that I have.
Yeah, maybe I can do that. Okay,
Yeah.
maybe next week if I can get there. What time do you leave? on Tuesdays.
It just depends on when but on Tuesday, like if you wanted to meet up like right before your class, I could stick around until 5, or is that when you start?
Around there, yeah. I have to technically leave a little after 5:30, but I get on the road and I'm still available for work. So because they have our hours for the 10-hour days to be off on Fridays.
Nice.
So yeah, I'll definitely reach out to you for that. Thank you.
No, just text me and I can make it work. Or I could even like put them in the office, or except for the office closes at 5.
Could you put them in the room, like under
I could do that.
Yeah. I don't think anybody will notice or take them. So that would be better.
Yeah, the rooms are supposed to be open. Like the university is supposed to know where classes are being held. I don't, some things that you
It's no big. I was there early, so it worked out perfect. It was fine.
Good.
Yeah, I just wanted to be able to get online, get everything going. Because I'm doing all my classes with a Padlet too, because I have cut people out so that way they can grab everything.
Cool.
Yeah, it's so much easier to use. And I can drop a PowerPoint in a Padlet, which is nice too.
Oh, cool. So that was 5 minutes. Should I go?
Yeah, if you don't mind. Yeah. Are you there, Miss Julie?
So let's see, Julie. So Julie didn't join a breakout room. We are in her backyard, actually. 3 of us are.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it is nice, but it's a little warm. And Cheryl, I just sent you a chat. So my computer just died. We were each on our own computers, but mine just died. So I'll be watching from Julie's. So she just went inside, so I can tell you this. She's not very tech savvy. But I am, so I can join the chat, the rooms and stuff with her computer.
What we could do, since there's already 3 of you together, I'll just call on you as a separate group if that's okay. If you guys don't mind answering the questions.
That's fine. I was actually in the group and we answered them together. So I was in room 2 and then my computer died. Yeah. And then Sonia's in room 3 and she
got it.
Yeah, so we're good. I think we're good.
Oh, then perfect. Okay, thanks for letting me know.
Sure, thanks, Cheryl.
Go and enjoy that backyard. How nice.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, she has a pool, so yeah.
Ooh, put your toes in for me.
Awesome. We're sticking our feet in the pool, keeping cool.
I love it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Such a great turnout. I was just going through all the groups, and there's so much conversation in so many
Yeah.
groups.
That's amazing. Good. We have one group that's working together. They're in different breakout rooms, but they all happen to be together in one person's backyard. I thought that was so cool. I was like, that's so nice to work like
Oh, nice.
right? And like have the outside together. And I love that.
Maybe they'll write down who they are so I can put them in. If there's another group, just put them in one group.
Yeah, if we have another, yeah, that might be a good idea. But they were really great. They were in their own breakout rooms working together, but they just wanted to let me know. So I thought that was so cool.
Yeah, that makes a Friday afternoon workshop work it,
I think,
right?
yeah, you get your vitamin D and you get your, that camaraderie, that nice
Right.
friendship thing. I love that. Connections. And then Miss Rhonda, that's a beautiful view outside your window.
I know, that's what someone else said. It's like I'm on the 12th floor.
Oh,
A building, my building is 12th floor. So I'm on the 12th floor. I'm in Houston.
nice. It's
And
beautiful.
so I was like, the only drawback is that the building is on the feeder road of the highway,
Oh, okay.
of Highway 69. So I hear all the traffic all day. So I feel like I've been driving all day. So it's time to go home. I'm like, I don't want to drive anymore. I don't want to drive home because I hear the traffic. Like,
So when you hear silence, it's really nice, right?
yes. I've been here since January. So I'm in this building. So it's I'm starting to finally get used to it. And I usually have the radio on so I can drown it out a little bit.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. Eventually, hopefully, it's just background noise. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of time. It's so much other things going on that it does become background noise.
Good.
Yeah,
Well, beautiful view. I love it.
thank you.
And is everybody back, guys? I can't tell.
I think so.
Oh, good. Okay. So, how many breakout rooms were there?
7.
7.
7. Awesome. All right. So let's start with, let's go into question 1 and let's choose breakout room 1. I'll just go in order. Breakout room 1, what was your response to question 1?
So to meet a need.
To meet a need. Okay, good. All right. And then breakout room 2, what was your answer to 1?
Well, I'll answer. I think we were 2.
I was about to say, what number were we?
I
Yeah,
think
it
we
was
were
Joanne,
2.
Rhonda, Tammy.
Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't remember.
Yeah, we said to answer questions, to help.
And help. Okay, very good. All right. So for question 1, why does a person come to me? A lot of times that's going to be our perception on what it is we feel constantly. Fielding, meaning what is it that we start to realize is happening more often? And there's always a variety of reasons why people will come to you. But a lot of times we'll start to narrow it in on what happens most often. So hearing things like the need, answering questions, and help. So those are things that right away, what'll happen is your perception in your brain, what you already are, ready for, is when somebody says, "Can I meet with you? Can I talk to you real quick?" Immediately you'll go to the things that come to mind because they happen the most often. And sometimes we miss information because we're already under the impression of why this person's coming to us. So thinking of our staff as a consumer and our product is being able to remove barriers, being able to give information about procedures or protocol, being able to develop some assistance that's above what they're capable of doing. A lot of times we miss our product with what their needs are, and we categorize why they come to us based on what's happened more often. So then coming into, and as we start to develop that empathy interview process, even if you don't go through the empathy interview with people, as you start to do this even once or twice, after a while, what happens is you just become open and you're okay not knowing why a person comes to you. And then you start to develop a different relationship and rapport and trust with your customer, which is your staff, so that you don't immediately want them to get to the point. While we are busy, when somebody does come to us, like a staff member, a lot of times it does take those extra few minutes, and it turns out it's actually not much longer if we just wait to see why they really are approaching us or needing us. And so think of that, like, okay, I already had an idea why most people come to me and it's my go-to. And now what I'm going to do is kind of let that prior knowledge go, those experiences, and just be open. And what happens is our listening opens up a little different. Our ability to ask open-ended questions changes when our perception changes of what it is, they're needing from us right away and are coming to us for, because that's the second one. But it's going to be interesting to have your mind shift. And what I would love for you to do for yourself is to have like a little journal off to the side, even a little book, it doesn't matter, where you just jot down a feeling or a way that you saw it differently. Like, I really thought that she was going to come in and ask that same question. And it turned out, because I didn't start off with, okay, what's your question? Or how can I help you? Oh, let me, immediately setting myself up to assume why they're coming in, and changing it to just, how can I help you? And just open, what's on your mind. That's it, nothing else, no other prompts, no other, answering their questions right away or finishing their sentences, so that then they start to realize, wow, I can walk in and anything is available at that time. And so that's what we're wanting, is that connection to them, that rapport, that trust. And a lot of times it's just keeping it super generalized, and then write down how it felt and how surprised you were that they came to you for something you weren't ready for, which is good, because that's what we need. We need to find out about those situations that are not coming to us, because people realize, oh, when I come in, they're just going to want me to get to the point, or I'm not, I don't necessarily go to, my director for this information or my lead for this information. So start thinking about that. All right, so question 2, breakout room 3, what was your answer to why do you think they need you?
This is Lauren, Rachel, Sarah, Charles C.
So I forgot what group number I was in. Okay, so we said because the person, they're probably coming to us because we have been at the company for a long time. We have encountered various situations that more than likely we would have an answer for them.
Okay, so your experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So breakout room 4, what did you answer on this one?
To Cindy, Cynthia, Julian.
I think just kind of similar to what they said, it's like they know, or they're hoping that we can help solve their problem. Like they're choosing us because they feel like there's something that we can do to help them.
All right, very good. So a lot of times the difference between somebody actually taking the action of coming to you will be very different than why they actually do need you. And so again, through the empathy process, you're going to start to find that there's other things we haven't addressed. So there's those root causes and unmet needs. And that's going to also develop that open-mindedness from you and realizing, wow, was it really even my experience? It was theirs. Or, you know, turning it around on solving that problem. Actually, they were coming to us with a solution. And so it starts to change why they need you. A lot of times you have people that are your staff and they actually do have ideas and solutions. They're just not sure that you're the person to come to. And when you start to open up those empathy interviews and those open-ended questions where you're just listening, they start realizing you're there to listen more. And then they want to then give you information about their experiences and their problem solving skills as well. So it becomes a back and forth. And so a lot of times we're in a position where, for instance, when I do this training with other regions for service center consultants, they, you know, felt like they needed them to develop something or give them something that was very general, something that, you know, here, this is what this classroom would need, or this type of teacher, or this certain profession. And it turned out that when they started to this process, they were realizing that sometimes they're coming to me for different reasons. And also they need me to promote also their ideas and what it is they're thinking about and wanting to develop. And they also want to start to share their experiences. So sometimes we already have an idea because of, again, what's happened over and over. And we also start to develop that in ourselves. So in other words, we represent a need or a reason to come to us, and we start to identify with that as well. And through our actions and words and the things that we say, we also start to limit why people might come to us or need us. And so through these empathy interviews, again, that listening process for those root causes and unmet needs, you're going to be very surprised. It starts to shift how you identify yourself as well in the organization and in your position. So start thinking about those things because it starts to shift some of this. And that's what's really interesting about relating this as a customer service perspective. You know, like, well, I have a product, but it's not always what I thought it was. Some people want to use your position, your experience, your ability for a different reason. And so opening that up, again, starts to build that back and forth. And it also helps to develop the people that you are working so hard for. All right, so now question 3, let's go to breakout room 5.
Is Jen, Joanne, Robin?
So we simply said that it was to provide support. It could
Nice.
be support through a variety of different things.
Great. All right, breakout room 6, same question. How do I make their life and work easier?
Is Molly, Patsy, Priscilla, Tangela?
I can share. I think we did talk about supporting. I think sometimes listening, and I think people also come to you just, they already have the answer. And so we talked about, you know, I don't like listening, and then some, if you listen enough, then typically the answer comes into it. So I don't know, just being there to support them, listen. And I think coming up with a plan is also how to make their, like, because they know they were heard and they know that something hopefully will change, whether it's something they're going to do or something you're going to do.
I love that. Yes. So thinking about how do I make their life and work easier, that's that user perspective. Are they going to use the product that I'm giving them? Are they going to use what my experience and what I'm capable of doing to remove those barriers or support their plans and new ideas? And then what is that next step going to look like? And more importantly, through the design thinking process, when you start to delve into empathy interviews, I'm also hopeful with some of the resources I give you to start to read a little bit more about design thinking if you aren't exposed to it now through Stanford University, because one of the next steps is that accountability piece where you develop something with them in mind and it surrounds them. And then you move forward and actually have steps. And then there's accountability with it and checking in and then pivoting based on what the new unmet need or root cause may be in order for it to continue to develop. So the plan or the next step is that we're okay trying something, piloting it, working on it, and then coming back if it still isn't solving whatever that concern was, or developing that idea that came out of being able to support and listen. So it's super interesting where you start to see how do I make their life and work easier? A lot of times that's a long term, and then sometimes if it's in short term, but it's based on plans, next steps that are developed, but based on what they're telling you and what comes out of a process like an empathy interview. It goes back to their unmet needs, those root causes and those barriers. So that then we develop something together in mind. We go and we start working with them rather than for them. And again, receiving, knowing what your experience is, what you already have. A lot of times we just tell people our story and experience and say, this is for you. This is your gift. I'm going to give you the answers. I'm going to give you the procedure. I'm going to give you my information, my perspective, and what I've done. And those gifts sometimes get returned, or sometimes they get regifted to somebody else because it's not at all what they were needing from us. So why they came to us, or it really didn't work to make their life or work easier. And so it starts to eat away a little bit at that trust. Like, she really wasn't listening to me. I didn't want socks again for Christmas, right? And so sometimes what we think is a gift turns out we've missed the mark. It's not at all what they were asking for and needing. So again, that empathy interview process and that storytelling process is about listening and then landing on what it is. And they start to build trust through that. And you start to also develop a different mindset when it comes to people walking towards you or needing something from you. So, all right, so now breakout room 7, you are taking question 4.
Well, if no one wants to speak up, I'll say our final answer was listening.
Very good. It's a trend. I love it. Very good. Yes. So how do I identify it? Yeah, I have to truly listen. And so we're really going to delve into that listening piece too, what it is we're looking for and focusing on. And it's going to feel a little different at times. And also through that little journal, I hope you start to keep, that's a great place to put the impact that it makes on you as well, being a listener. It is truly eye-opening when you really do listen. It's very different. Sometimes what we do is we get into our mode because we have experience and a lot of prior knowledge where we're like, a situation comes to us, we can already, I already know what's going to happen, or I already know the end of that story, or I already know where this is going. And it prevents somebody from really telling their perspective in that part of the story. And then the story doesn't get an ending. We've ended it for them. And so because that's based on experience, that's what we know, right? And I think if anything, in the last couple of years, we've been proven wrong on that. We don't know the end of the stories. So we really do need to wait till the end. So I hope this is a little helpful, just kind of developing, like, I had an idea of what it is, my position is, what product I'm giving my customer, right? My staff, and then coming back and saying, you know what, I need to open up a little bit more and maybe not finish sentences or assume, and then be okay finding out through this listening process. And it's going to take some time at the beginning, but that time, we all know that front loading, that experience that we need to have that's new and different is so needed right now for us, and being able to move forward. And it changes also how they identify with us, not just how we identify and start to self-reflect, but also how they start to identify with your position and you as a person. So I hope that was helpful, and also that you go back and read that article. It's really good. Now we're going to start to delve into the actual empathy interview and those root causes and things that we need to develop, right? So first things first, we need to develop what the purpose is for our interview. So just individually right now on your own, on some paper or something in front of you, just write down, think of one staff member or a group, if you're so bold, yes, and write down what would that purpose be for an empathy interview. Think of one area of need for you right now that you're thinking, or a pattern, something. What would be your purpose? Or even maybe it's just to develop your skill set in empathy interviews or listening. So whatever it is, it's personal and that's your goals. So write down, what would be your purpose for this very first empathy interview? I'll give you a minute to do that. And as you are finishing that up, if you could give us either a thumbs up with our icons on Zoom, or if you're not familiar with it, maybe just a quick thumbs up that we could see, or even just a Y, yes, I'm done, in the chat so that we just know. Thank you. That'll be helpful. And then if Chris or Bev just want to let me know we've got the majority done. Just your purpose for an empathy interview. And then would one person like to be brave enough, that risk taker, and share what their purpose would be to develop this first empathy interview?
I have a staff person that works for me who I know is just going through a lot right now. And I think she could just really use an empathy interview.
I love it. Thank you, Molly. I appreciate that. That's a fabulous reason to start this process. All right, now we're going to choose an open-ended question to gain more insight. No more than 2 or 3. Sometimes, like in my story, it just took one, and it, you know, worked itself out with me just prompting after, not having to ask another one. These 3 are the go-tos, and they start to help develop those feel-good stories. It's really important that we word this in a positive way, because again, most feel-good stories start with some sort of difficulty or situation, and what feels good at the end is the fact that you overcome, you know, accomplished and got through that moment. So tell me about a time when you were successful with using this, or going to a home, or working with this family. You know, what happened when you tried whatever maybe the new, you know, test is, or the new form of strategy to work with a certain, or communication strategy, whatever it is. And when you talk to them in terms of their own ability and success, they're again going to feel more open. So we're still going to find out a lot about what's missing through those stories, especially at the beginning. Or I should say the second part of the beginning, because the first part of the beginning will be a lot of telling you what they think you want to hear. So working through that. And then, tell me an experience with. These are great starters to help you. So just choose one as you're developing this empathy interview with yourself right now. So just, you have your purpose, like Molly does, a particular staff member. Now just choose one of these to start off with, and then maybe start to write the rest of that prompt. And it may change as you get closer to doing the empathy interview. That's a good thing. Rethinking, revising, re-editing, that's a really good thing to do. You should change your mind often, because you start to see things a little different. That's a good thing. So just right now, just start to develop it. So while you're doing that, they're about 20 to 30 minutes sometimes, in that first interview, and especially with one open-ended question, one area that you want to dive into, and it turns out it may be a totally different area. But if you block yourself an hour, it does help with the prepping, the building rapport. Sometimes it takes 10 or 15 minutes for you to truly get that person to realize you are honestly going to give them time to tell their story from beginning to end with all the elements that you mentioned earlier. It may take a little bit of time. They're not going to start off right at the gate and tell you honestly what's going on, not because they don't want to be honest, but because they're a little unsure if you're going to listen to the whole story. And then that also, within that hour, it also helps you go back and start to look at those focusing points we're going to go through. So now that you have a goal set in mind, and then you've chosen at least one open-ended question, and you're starting to develop what it is you're going to ask, let's also now choose 2 of the prompts. And the reason being is you want to fluctuate between the 2 of them. If you can handle all 3, that's great, but you will find yourself searching for a prompt, wanting to raise an eyebrow, wanting to jump into the story, wanting to ask other open-ended questions or even closed. You start to develop the end or the middle of the story yourself in your head. Sometimes we listen by talking. We listen by adding rather than just opening up to listen. And so when you find yourself doing that, really start focusing on these prompts and try to only use these for now. They will absolutely help get you as a listener back on track, and also the person telling the story to open up a little bit more. So choose at least 2 of these. Start to practice these with people in your homes. They're just going to love you for that. And so they're also going to be a little confused because you're asking, well, tell me more about that. And they're going to be like, really? You want to know more right now? Like, usually you don't have time for that. And so you're going to be a little surprised. As you start to use these prompts, especially the prompts throughout a story, find also time in that journal to just jot down a few feelings that you're having, and awkward, difficult, or this was actually eye-opening, it felt good, what a genuine connection I felt I made. So choose your 2 prompts for sure. The tell me more about that, you wouldn't be able to fill out right now. That's going to be in the moment. So you can use those a few times. How did that make you feel? That's a great one. And it's also a difficult one sometimes for people, like, really? You really want to know how I felt? Walk me through that. So if you can record through video, of course, with informed consent, that's always the best way. And the reason being is you want to have your hands open while you're just listening. It really is all that body language. And remember, control your eyebrows, because it says everything to somebody. They already know you're assuming something, or going to answer surprised or confused or concerned. And so you want to really watch those nonverbals for yourself. But more importantly, you want to catch on to their nonverbals. All the communication that they use with their bodies and their face and their hand gestures. Some smiles are not really a smile. Sometimes it's nervous energy. And so, and again, because they're not real certain you're listening, and they're also not real certain that what they're saying is landing well, or this is really what you want to hear. And so, are you sure you're really interested in my personal story? So the recording is awesome because it frees everything up. Often I do these through Zoom if I'm not doing it on the fly in the moment, and I'll schedule them, and I let them know. Let's talk about 30 minutes. A lot of times it takes less as we start to build that rapport. Zoom has been nice, even if I can go and see them in person. If it's the first time I'm going to interact with that particular staff member or teacher or paraprofessional or whoever it is I'm working with, it helps build also a little bit of a safe zone because they're in an area that's familiar and comfortable with them, and I'm not in their space. So sometimes that works. You maybe have somebody, a staff member you're working with, and all these other things have not worked. And right now you're working on that rapport, building it back up, or that trust. Sometimes just saying, join me on this, frees them up from that other part of it. So then you would have to watch, just mostly facial expressions. But again, if they give you that, consent, and they're informed about why you're, utilizing any kind of video, that nobody else is going to see it. It's just for you to go back, so that right now you can really be present during their story. Then that helps you go back and look and catch on to some of those nonverbals, and also things that you go back and you realize, well, that's actually what they said. It wasn't what I thought. Because we are going to, the first few times, have our biases, assume things that they're saying, hear things that they didn't say. It's very surprising how we do that. We're in a hurry and we finish a lot of thoughts or we finish people's sentences with our thoughts. That's another reason why I want you to kind of pay attention to how you're feeling as you're becoming a better listener. So if you're not able to record, then just make sure you're taking limited notes and that they're very quick, or have a partner that can be in the vicinity as well, but not anywhere where the person can actually see them so they can take those notes, or just an audio recording so you could at least pick up their story and their information. You're going to be interested as you start to use those prompts more and more naturally. So you are going to be involved in the story. You're going to be present and hearing everything. But again, sometimes we miss information. So if you can't record, hopefully you can record through audio, or have a note taker with you. That's also builds some rapport and ability for them to hear you or to trust you while you're in the room. So those are things to just start to consider. And then also note taking. So really important that, again, like I was saying, that they're not watching you, because a lot of times when we go to write, people then want to tell us what they think they should hear. So we want to make sure we don't do that, because they're going to be very interested in what you're writing, what you're landing on, and they're going to want to tell you exactly what it is that they think you want to write down in here. So really important. And then you're going to be able to go back and use that time that you're not in the interview to analyze and see what it is that you focused on, what you got out of them, and what their feel-good story is telling you. All right. So then what we're going to do right now is go back into the breakout rooms, Chris, and we're going to have everybody talk a little bit about why trust is hard to build, and then come back and share that consensus. What is it that you feel is difficult about building trust? So we'll go into our breakout rooms and get information about trust. Why is it hard? My internet started to get unstable. I was like, oh no, it's perfect timing though. It's usually like that when my son's home and he's playing video games at the same time I'm trying to.
Oh man. No, I didn't hear any glitches or anything.
Maybe just like a few more minutes. I don't think this one will take as long, but we'll see. I hope they have some good conversation around this, because a lot of times we think we're in a position people should just trust us. So what do you think so far?
No, it's great.
Yeah. You think it's helping dive more into?
Yeah, going around in the last breakout sessions, they were having really great conversations. So I'm sure the conversations will be great in this one as well. And
Okay, good. Thanks. Just getting feedback. Want to make sure. It's so hard. Even in a room with people, it's hard to get. People right now are just so like,
yeah. Now, hopefully we can, or you can break the ice with getting people to talk about it with this one.
trying. Yeah. Good turnout though, too. Very excited about that.
Yeah.
How many did the survey?
It's 21 out of 34.
That's awesome.
We'll see
Thanks
how many
for
do
doing
the post one.
Thank you so much for doing that.
Sure.
I like your brain, Miss Rhonda.
Thank you.
Where did I just hear that before?
We were just talking about that.
We might have most people back, Sheryl.
I think Sheryl was frozen and is refreshing.
Okay. Did we lose her?
We might have lost her, but
She'll
how
come back.
about, can we get some folks to share out just while we're waiting for Cheryl's? She said her internet connection had a little error message earlier, so that maybe she was losing it and logging back in.
Okay.
But what did folks talk about in their groups? I won't call each group, but some volunteers to talk about what you talked about with trust and why it's so hard to build.
I know in our group, we talked a lot about past experiences that could be brought forward to your current job. And if staff or individuals haven't worked on those past experience to grow or need to talk to somebody about them, it can go into your current job, working with your supervisor on learning to trust them, trust your coworkers, things like that. So we talked a lot about past experiences.
Yeah, what else?
We talked about how opening yourself up to someone leaves you vulnerable. And especially if your relationship is a new one with that person, you just don't know, what might happen if you go to them with a problem and how they might look at you. And so you really are leaving yourself open to what might happen because of that.
Absolutely.
We talked about time, the time involved. It takes so much time to build a trusting relationship, and time is a precious commodity, of course, for all these people. But then on the flip side, it's kind of interesting if you think about how much time it only takes a second to lose trust, but it takes so much time to build up trust and then to keep trust.
What else?
We also spoke about that, yes, it definitely takes time, but oftentimes in the positions that we are, we have like a revolving door, right? And those people that you just start feeling that you can trust, then maybe leave or move on to another position. And so that leaves us vulnerable again to not want to trust the next person.
Yeah. And it's hard to build it with COVID too, like with just not seeing people, like, and being in that space together all the time. I think that's made it hard, as a new person at my job, it's hard to really build those strong bonds if you're not working every day in person.
And in our group, we also said there's sometimes so much focus on performance. Yeah, if you're looking at a worker's performance, that they might feel a little bit judged. So it's harder to build that trust because they feel like you're constantly judging them.
Right.
Yeah. How do you all make that time and build trust with your folks that you're working with? Does anyone have any good tips or strategies for how you do it?
No, one thing that I do, Christopher, is like when they come to me to express or vent any concern, if I'm giving any strategies or I giving them some options to do, I put in. I'm the sticky notes person. I have a sticky notes to what to follow. So within a week or 2 weeks, even that everything is resolved, I go back to the person. I say, hey, I see that you have the conversation with this person. How it's go? How do you feel about it? Is there something? I always follow up any request, even it is something about an hour, a time card, something simple. I always follow up, always. And they know that they can trust that whatever they are needing, I will do what I can do, and the follow up will reassuring them that I work with their requests or with their issues, always.
Yeah, it goes back to what Tammy was saying about accountability, right? You just got to show it every time that you're going to follow up to your word and respond. Yep. And then if you don't do it, that can erode, and that trust can quickly disappear.
Right.
Yep.
Sheryl, I got a text message from Sheryl that she's trying to log in again.
Yeah. What do y'all think about actually doing a formal empathy interview with your staff members? Are there any hesitancies or additional questions that you'll have for Sheryl when she comes back about the practicality of doing this formal conversation to combat some of those big deep-seated challenges that you're facing, or to just promote positivity through a feel-good story, which I think I want a little bit more clarification on the difference between those two.
Yeah, this is Chelsea. I feel like I do this because my staff that report directly to me or that I'm directly supervising, and I'm a program director, but I do have some staff that I directly work with on a weekly basis. So I meet with them each week, almost every week. And I feel like we do this almost every time we meet, but not quite as formalized But definitely there's opportunities to intersperse that into the conversations that you're having with them about, some of the challenges that they're facing with families and some of those sticky situations they get into that they aren't seeing a great way out or a way to address it. And, we end up talking about deeper things usually.
Yeah.
I think that's really would be more the goal for me, is to do this on a more informal basis, but to do it consistently.
Yeah. No, I think the interview isn't super like formal, like it has to be this, but so the interview is informal, but I think what you're saying is like the consistency of doing it and scheduling it and setting a time to do it. That's the formal component, is my understanding. The conversation is just a story and you're listening and you're.
Oh, right. Right. Yeah, I think maybe it's, maybe it seems a little bit more formalized to me just because we're learning about it today and it seems pretty structured. And I think it's just again, I think it's just something that I do anyway on a regular basis for the most part, to ask the open-ended questions. And so I think probably it's structured a bit more today because we're learning it.
I also thought the idea of recording it, that seems very formal.
Yeah.
Has anyone ever recorded a conversation with somebody that you're supervising?
No.
No.
I don't think that they will, I don't know, I never asked, but I don't think that they will feel comfortable sharing their story or their need if I'm recording it, unless I'm a psych.
Especially if it's like conflict between people, or you're talking about specific family, or I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the recording could be difficult. And then, well, nowadays you never know how those recordings are going to be used, right?
Right.
That might be a little difficult to have people open up that way. I think one question I have too is what happens when it's something I can't handle anymore? Or if you really start getting down to a deep-rooted personal issue or an emotional issue that I can't handle. And that would worry me a little bit.
I think that does happen a lot. And I think it happens a great deal in the workplace now because, people are really opening up to me more about some of their personal issues and how that affects their work and their interactions. And I have faced this where there's some things going on that are really beyond my scope. And I mean, luckily we are in an agency where we can actually give them some resources and recommend that they pursue some other resources like counseling or just talking to a mental health expert, something like that, because that's absolutely a part of the workforce now that we're hearing about those things.
Right.
Wow.
All right, I'm back. I felt like I had to repark my car and fly up flights of stairs, and then I was in the wrong building, and then, all right, here goes. I'm back. I was like,
That's okay. Thank you.
No worries, Sheryl. We just had a really great conversation about trust and about just the presentation so far. So I think we can.
Good. So you guys trusted I was coming back though, right?
Of course.
Yes. I could feel that trust. Good. Awesome. So what were some of the highlights on what's so hard about building trust?
So just to summarize what people were saying, people talked about it takes time to build trust, like time over time to develop that trusting relationship, and then also time within listening to a story, to listen to somebody talk to you. One question was about, the trust of being audio recorded. Some people thought that, including myself, like, you know, how does that impact the trust of having the conversation audio recorded? And then we were just wondering what your thoughts were on that.
I love that question. Yes, I do get, of course, you know, some people that are reluctant, especially because I actually push the video recording first. I've done this with parents and different professionals. And I will say, at first, yes, they're a little bit apprehensive, but I think it's how you inform them. That's why that informed consent is so important. So what I do is I just inform them, I want to be present while you're telling your story. And so that I am not with my head down trying to take notes or gather information. I want us to spend that quality time together. So I'm able to go back and listen and pick up what it is you're needing from this. And so then that transparency seems to help as well. And it's part of that building trust. And then also what happens is that, you know, guarantee that the video or audio is not to be shared with anybody else. And it's just for the purpose of note taking and gathering information to come back so that you can work on next steps and a plan and accountability and designing something around them based on their story. That what's important is this is going to be what helps you really dive back into what that story was and what it is they're trying to say and communicate. And so it's that, again, building that trust. And so, yes, you're going to get a lot of hard no's. I just let it go and be as present as I can and try to take notes in a way that's not distracting. Because once again, as soon as I pick up a pen, I don't know how you guys feel, as soon as somebody writes something down that I just said, I'm a little curious about what they're writing down. And so it changes that. So a lot of times that ability to just record frees that up, but explaining and having that transparency and the purpose for the recording. And then that afterwards it's gone. It'll be erased, deleted, you know, there's nobody else is going to look at it. It has no, you know, it's just, and again, I've gotten the hard nose and I just do my very best to pick up on things. Have some sort of quick note-taking process that I can rely on later to come back to maybe some letters or signals or something that helps me. I have to tell you, in all the years that I was a speech language pathologist during testing with even my 3-year-olds, they noticed what I was writing down. I would also get students immediately asking me, did I make 100? You know, did I pass your test? Did I, you know, this is, you know, how we're already born with this judgment, you know, that hangs over us. And so being able to record should be the least of their worries. It should be a tool or a platform for them. And giving it to them, it's really so that you and I can spend this quality time together, free of all of that ability to remember what's so important from your story. So I hope that helped. Did I convince you, Chris?
I think so. I think maybe does it depend on, because we also talked about like mental health. A lot of people are having some, you know, really serious mental health challenges in the world that we're living in. And that can be scary to have that be on record, you know, because you never know if that could get out somehow, or, you know, because things happen. But in terms of other things, everything makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And again, it's just that transparency and then the purpose of it, and then just the guarantee that it's gone after. It's just for my own note-taking purpose after. Again, and I've gotten hard no's, and I've gotten hard no's from the teachers that were that the whole purpose of the empathy interview was around them. So I understand their reluctancy. So, and I honor that. That's fine. But again, if you can, then what a great tool. Yeah. So thank you so much for getting me caught up on that. All right. So you guys landed on this already. It takes time to open up. So we need to trust the process, but the process needs to be as transparent as possible. That's the most important thing. All right. So it'll get rid of that. I'm going to stop share and grab that Padlet again. Perfect. And I'm going to share right now. I'm just getting to the right area. And hopefully you go back and really utilize what's been given to you on the Padlet. Again, the resources are there just for you. Did most of you get on the Padlet?
Mm-hmm.
Good. All right. So by prompting to share more, the person will have an opportunity to open it more. That's what those prompts are for, is extending that time and giving you time also to remind yourself you're there to listen. And again, it's not a conversation. So I actually put, there was about 45 infant toddler teachers from Head Start through this process where they told each other feel-good stories in the same room. And so they were just very, broad, tell me about the time you made an impact on a family's life. And so they just turned and shared with a partner, and the partner, then the listener, was only able to ask the one open-ended question that everybody was using. And then they had to use 2 prompts, and it was the tell me more and how did that make you feel? And so as I walked around, we just did a practice with it, and we were going to gain some information from it. But more importantly, I just went around and reminded my conversationalists. So I had that, oh, that's right. Let me tell you about a time when that happened to me. And then I would say, remember, this isn't a conversation. Let's go back to our prompts. So we really practiced it together because we wanted them to then turn this around and utilize the process with a parent. That's like huge, right? And so they had to role play and practice with each other. And asking that, tell me more, or how did that make you feel, allowed them to realize, ooh, they really are going to listen. And we are going to spend some time on this story. And it started to shift how they told the story, and they opened up even more. And it was really interesting. And we took notes on all of those feelings. And the listener really talked about, like, it was a little awkward. Like, I really had something to say. I really wanted to, comment. I really wanted to finish her sentence. I really wanted to ask a different question. And so they were really impressed with themselves that they were able to hang on to that listening skill. And it was through those prompts, and also then working on that time needed. So again, note how you feel as a quiet listener. At first, people are going to still hold back. They're conditioned. We're all very conditioned right now to give information as quick as possible, and with the least amount of storytelling and more limited details is what actually happens because of that. And so we don't always get everything it is that they, we're there to talk about. So we talked earlier about why people come to us, and then we have our assumption based on prior knowledge, experience, and then we miss all this information. And that person walks out feeling not listened to. And we just go back into that cycle again. And we didn't build rapport. We think we gave them time, and we do have an open door, but walking in and walking out, they were left with the same questions, doubt, experience, or ideas. And so we really have to spend some time saying, okay, you know what, I'm going to be present right now. I'm just going to ask them to tell me more, a little more about that and how they're feeling. So that they know that we really are truly interested in their story. So I provided another resource for you that takes you through. It's a short one, it's nice, and it gives you more information about that empathy interview process. So now what am I looking for? We've got all this story time. I'm starting to develop my listening skills. I have a goal. I have my open-ended question. I've got a couple of prompts I'm going to start practicing all weekend. And now I'm ready, right, for my empathy interview process. So what is my focus? What am I searching for? This is when we need to go into scientific mode, if you will. I don't know if you've ever read Adam Grant's Rethink, but I definitely recommend it. And Adam Grant talks about how we find ourselves doing 3 different types of personalities or positions that we go into when we're talking to people or getting information. We either become a politician because we really want them to come on our side, or we start to also promote what it is we want from them. And he goes into all these things that we end up doing. And what we've been missing out on is being more of a scientist, being curious. That's what prompts are. That's what that open-ended question comes from, is being a scientist, being curious about what is about to be unveiled to you. So this promotes an idea that you're a blank slate and you have no idea where the story is going. That's interesting. That's a different approach. Again, looking at those 4 first questions, not assuming why they walk in, not assuming why they need you, not assuming that you do make their job easier or better, but actually just being open and saying, you know what, scientifically, I'm going to wonder and be curious about where I'm going with this and where they're going with their story through listening. So here's things you can focus on. So we want to focus on the responses, and these are the parts of the responses we want to focus on. And so we're looking for any of these phrases throughout their story. And it's what's happening after this phrase that we're starting to get their actions, their contributions, if you will. And that's coming from Simon Sinek's developing your why, finding your why. It's those contributions, those actions. We want to focus on that. If you know a little bit about language development, or you've heard a little bit, language starts to develop in nouns in infancy, you know, and on when we're starting to label things in our environment for our babies. But actually what happens after 3 or 4, when we start to put words together, we rarely use nouns. We most of the time generate information through adjectives, descriptions, feelings, and verbs. So we really don't speak with an item or a place or a person. We really speak more based on actions and feelings and describing them. And so most of those stories have that really rich information for us. And so after all of these phrases, and there's many more, but you can see where this is going. After, it's those actions, those contributions that they've made in the story that we're after. And so it's, I didn't know, I couldn't, nobody told me, I tried, but it never worked. And by the way, if you ever prompt back for that, tell me more about that. Tell me more about you trying that. They'll tell you it's that one day they tried it and it never worked. And that's about as much patience as we have right now, right? And so that's interesting. Then you start to develop that barrier, that root cause. Wow, you know, I gave them a strategy and they used it for a day. Maybe I need to revisit how that next step's really going to look. What does that accountability look like? Okay, so we need to track it for longer than a day, so that we can see whether this works or not. You know, I never do whatever that action or contribution is. That's not my style. That's not me. That's not how we do things. Maybe you're new in your position and people will come to you and say, that's not how we do things here. That's not where the coffee maker goes. That's not how I get off the elevator. You know, that's not where I park. And so we get very hooked in that. But yet we want change. We want to see different outcomes. We want to progress and learn new things. And so when we find ourselves listening to somebody and their story say, but that's not me, that's not what I do, that's not in my wheelhouse, we are finding their unmet need. We are discovering the root cause. This is really interesting stuff. And then you go back and you start to develop a plan, a procedure, an idea around them. You surround what it is that's missing because you really listened. And it takes a while to get to these statements, because let me tell you, these statements are created in a vulnerable moment. Think about that. It's a vulnerable moment when we admit we don't know something, that we tried something and it didn't work. even if we sound defensive, because it wasn't us, like that didn't work, right? It wasn't me, that didn't work. It's still pretty vulnerable. We need to honor that by then saying, well, how did that make you feel? Tell me more about that. Instead of stopping and saying, aha, that's what's wrong. No, we still need to wait. We need to give more time because we're going to get to the next part of what we're focusing on. And those are the feelings, the impact from their story. We've got to let them finish their stories. So put those in your mind and say, wow, right after I'm frustrated by, that's the contribution, that's the action that's going to lead us and discovering, because we're scientists, we're curious, we're open-minded, we have no idea where this story is going. And that's going to start to help us discover what it is we want to now develop around. Now, this is what we need to increase or decrease. This is why my next step makes sense. And this is why, we're going to be more vested. And then if I only had, if only I had more time for this, time is a huge barrier for everybody. And it's interesting when you give them back time, they don't see it that way. So you've got to focus on what that next step's going to look like so that people see the difference in whatever it is you're designing for them and with them. Really important that it becomes with them. Remember, we don't want to gift them the socks that they didn't ask for. Maybe they don't like to wear socks, right? We need to pay attention to that. They're telling us. They don't listen to me about. It's interesting. That happens a lot during communication between families and service providers. Very often, it's because the other person didn't get my message, didn't hear me out, didn't try. And that tells us something. Maybe then it's the way you gave the message. Maybe I need to help develop and design a different way to communicate a message to families. Maybe we need to think outside the box and try something new. Because I'm telling you, they're not listening to me. And this happens very often. And everything stops, progress stops. No, they weren't going to listen. And so you find in these stories where they're reluctant and where things no longer work for them. And that's okay. We have to acknowledge and honor that. That's their perception. That's what they're going to continue to believe and think. So they need to talk about it so that we can take it and then design something around that. So those verbs, the descriptions, they occur right after those phrases. And you'll find more and more of these phrases, but you can see a pattern. So I'm just going to take a minute. Does anybody have any questions about the particular phrases that we're looking for our contributions or actions? Okay, great. So if you ever have an opportunity to grab a hold of Simon Sinek's Finding My Why, it's a great way to develop teams as well. But it also will talk to you about those contributions. So recognizing the impact of their story, that's going to come now with, you've given it some time, you used your prompts, they realize you really are listening. They start to talk about those vulnerable moments when things didn't work out or what they were working against. And now we're going to start to identify those feeling words. Those are impacts. And you're going to recognize what affected them or even others in their story. And that family afterwards were so relieved that we finally got through this. They felt so much closer to us. It, really helped build that trust between me and this mom finally. And so you'll hear, and you'll also hear probably more towards the beginning when they're really opening up about their vulnerability, those negative feelings. We need those. We need to recognize those. That's our why, all those feelings, why we do something or why we avoid doing something. It's the feelings, it's the emotions that occur, that are building and building and building that we don't get to unload on anybody or talk about or understand. And they come out of these stories. So we want to start to acknowledge that impact, and that's how it's going to guide us on how we interact while we're developing our next steps and our plans. So this is a huge part of it, is the feelings part. And it is complicated and can feel difficult, but those feelings are already at the surface. And through the empathy process and understanding your goal and what it is you're trying to gain from it, and continuing to listen past that, letting them land at the end of the story, you build that trust. A lot of times they need that opportunity to unload that part. If not, it's going to surface in other ways that you're not going to have some sort of impact on or be able to help with if it occurs somewhere else. If it's a particular staff member you're concerned that you start to scratch that surface and things are going to come out, well, that surface is going to be scratched somewhere else, right? And so why not now during a safe opportunity between you and that person when they're just opening up? And so those emotions are already there. And if you see them brewing, they're going to happen somewhere else. And so this is the best opportunity to build trust, when people can let it all out, you know, and cry like my teacher, and then the director realizing, wow, this was a lot bigger than I thought, and allowing it to happen. We needed that moment. We really did. So those feelings, that really does matter. So I just want to stay here for a minute and see, I know this is the biggest part of what's scary about it, right? But I want to see if anybody's kind of working through that and feeling brave enough and saying, you know what, I'm going to risk that because it's already brewing, it's already there. Does anybody feel now that this is part of the process? It might be a little difficult, but that you could see some positive coming out of it. If anybody would like to unmute and share your feelings on feelings.
I'll be vulnerable a little about it. I think when I'm thinking about some of this, and I think about conversations that we've had with some staff, I think where this becomes difficult at times is when, how do I say this? I guess when you see someone becoming very stressed and overwhelmed, who is maybe doesn't perform as well as someone else. So it's very confusing why I think for me, if you see someone who's, for example, maybe seeing 2 families a day instead of, you know, and feeling overwhelmed with that, trying to be genuine and curious enough to where truly that struggle is, or if you're listening to that and empathizing with that, how then do you, because I think some of the feedback we've gotten is, okay, you listen to me, but yet you're still expecting me to perform at this level or see this many families. So how do you balance that piece?
I think it's that gradual build, and that's allowing yourself as well to realize, even if I continue to have these expectations and they're continuing to show me, it's just like our little ones, it's just like our babies, right? We have these expectations, but they don't always meet them. We don't give up on them or, you know, shame them or make them feel bad, because that's that vulnerability piece, right? And it's coming back, and then you also taking a step back and saying, okay, I realize that it may not be fair to everybody, but it's already not fair, right? And they're already showing and demonstrating where they're at. So what would we normally do? We would build on what their strengths are. We would listen and then find out. And through this empathy process, you might discover something very unique and a reason why their productivity is lower, right? And then you'll know what your next step really truly needs to be based on that. You need to find out what their contributions are. What are those actions? What in their mind feels successful? And what is it they feel is getting in the way? And those feelings. And so, yes, you want to uncover those, and especially a one-to-one so that it's not a comparison, because then we've got to take a step back, right? We love all our kids, but differently. Yes. The same, but differently. And so we need to have that moment with them. And then building that next step is probably going to be a small step. And maybe that's what we've missed. We just continue to go back to the bigger expectation, the big picture. And maybe we discover a smaller step. And then in that, we find a way to onboard a new person later. Like, oh, this person who's had experience struggled with these abilities. And now I'm going to build them up, right? That's what we want to do. I mean, eventually your goal is to give them that confidence, that strategy, that go-to. And then we start to realize, wow, maybe this is a person who needs to mentor, because then they'll want their productivity to go up because they do have a really natural skill set in this area. Maybe there's somebody, you know, that's telling you like, I felt most successful when I did, and then whatever that is, I'm going to build on that. And my next steps in accountability, that design around and with them is going to be a little different, and it's going to be smaller steps. And then the most important part is I'm going to do like I normally do with my babies. I'm going to celebrate any type of growth. And a lot of times we have adults, we start to get into a mindset of you're an adult, you took a job, you should be able to handle all of these responsibilities. And what we're finding is a lot of adults are telling us, I'm not prepared and ready for this. I'm missing something, right? And I'm going to blame it on others and give you lots of excuses and situations. So if I go back and give them an opportunity to tell their story, I am going to be able to build on their strengths and do it slowly. If they're worth, you already have them there and you need them and you want to build them up, then that's going to be that time that's needed to build trust with them and trust with themselves. And so, yes, it's difficult, but it already is, right? It already is. And so then saying, you know what, I'm going to actually be productive and do something different with them. And it's going to be small steps. And I'm going to build on their strengths. Then little by little, I'm going to see that confidence and I'm going to celebrate it. Is it fair to everybody else? No, but that's not why they're an individual, right? They're individually taking care of what they can. If we want to continue to build them individually, then their design, their strategy is going to be with them. Does that make sense or kind of help?
Yes, thank you.
I know it's a lot to ask, but it's already a lot to ask now, right? And so we just continue to meet them. You know, these are your expectations. I'm trying to explain it to you. I need this to happen. And then we need to take a step back and, okay, why isn't it happening? And a lot of times through developing and designing with them, they even find themselves realizing what they can and can't do. They need to discover what they are and how well they can. And then through those abilities to celebrate the small steps, they realize they can take on more. We need to find out why that more isn't happening, right? And so it's a great opportunity for you to find out a little bit more about it. We can assume a lot of things, but we will be very surprised. And again, melding those contributions with those impacts, it's going to give you a lot more to work with. You know, patience and time, right? Who has that? We will now, right? It's worth it. Thank you so much, Julie. And I do appreciate you being my risk taker. Can you kiss your brain for me? I know. It's because I'm all early childhood. Can't help it. Anybody else? I really love that.
We're getting close to our ending time, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah.
But
did you 3 or 3:15? I just wanted, I saw.
I think I have it on my calendar for 3, but
oh, good. Okay.
For many of you, it's already 5, right? It's 3 our time, and for some of you, it's Friday night at 5 o'clock. But we'd like to open it up to any other questions or comments, and we want to make sure that you get a chance to ask Sheryl any other questions, and that you also complete the little survey that we have for the end, because if we haven't finished answering all your questions, we do want to get some input as to what else we can be doing to provide you the supports you need.
I put the post survey in the chat.
Thanks.
It's a different link, but it's just the same short questions plus an additional follow-up question.
I just wanted to say that was really good information, and I really understand the importance of it. Just trying to determine with all of the time frames and assignments and everything else that we have going on, how to take that time individually.
I think starting with maybe your most vulnerable, or just trying this with maybe one staff member first. What I've also done, I've worked with large groups and I do a sample. So I allow myself to, I've asked directors to send me 2 that are really, proficient in this area of need that you feel, is a need, until we find out really what is the need. And then 2 that, struggle, and maybe 1 that's more neutral. And then I just spend a little bit of time with those 5. So I just take a sample. Also, again, if there's just maybe 1 or 2 you have in mind, starting there and then doing them slowly over time. So this really isn't about getting everybody through the process, but maybe those that are really needing it. And then you find out some things, even if you sample, even like people that work in the office or do support or that are related to the service providers, doing samples with them as well. But just telling yourself, right now, I just want to try to do 1 and see what that looks and feels like.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank
That's
you.
really good information.
Thank you.
Sheryl, can you stop sharing your screen so we can see everybody?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks.
Of course.
Any other questions or comments for Sheryl?
Or if folks have any updates on anything that they've implemented from last time we met during the summit to now, I'd just love to hear if maybe you'd taken some of those ideas that Sheryl, gave us back. What month was it? April, March?
March.
Or some of the other sessions.
I know for us, we've met a lot with HR and as a directors group and assistant directors group, just to discuss everything that we've talked about since that meeting. We have implemented, they talked about the Sunshine Committee with one program. And so we have built that out within our agency. So each division has come up with their own group. We've gotten all the staff involved. And so we're planning, each division's planning like an individual teaming event that doesn't focus on work. We're bringing in TBRI practices with it. So that's one thing I know that we have gotten off the ground rolling for us within MHMR.
Great.
That's fantastic.
think that's a great example, Sarah. Sometimes maybe it's not us that can be doing, the empathy interviews or yes, because our schedules are so full. But it's how do you create that team of support, right? How do you get your HR staff on board? How can they help out with things that maybe you can't take care of on your own?
With our program, after that meeting, we took some time, not a whole day, just to celebrate the successes individually. And maybe somebody, we had some people share about becoming grandparents and some things that was just personal. And they laughed. We had a chance to laugh, and we ate lunch and everything together. That seemed to be really fun because it was the first time we had ever done that, where we just paused and we're not talking about, all of the deadlines we have for just this moment, just to celebrate, one staff person, son is getting married. And like I said, we're just taking that time just to celebrate each other.
Great.
That's wonderful.
Well, we don't want to keep you here longer than we have to. And Sheryl, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us and to inspiring us to not give up and to keep going and to really, keep finding that why in all of us and supporting our staff to the best of our abilities. Thank you from the bottom of my heart and for the program and for all our families and kids out there.
Thank you.
We have our next session is going to be when, Angie? The end of June?
June 30th, yes.
June 30th. And so we look forward to seeing you. Please spread the word. We'd love to see you all back and bring anybody else you want to bring on board. We'd be happy to have you. And we'll be in touch then.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
It'll be mentoring, right?
Yes, mentoring.
Oh, that's awesome.
So you have off on Fridays, Sheryl? That's a fun schedule.
Yeah, well, we have to work 10 hours Monday through Thursday. So I don't know, Fridays you're like, yeah. Oh, yes.
Sure, go ahead, Lauren.
I didn't want to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
The session for the end of June, is that Dr. Elizabeth Beavers from U of H Clear Lake?
Yes.
Yep.
That was my professor in grad school. I was gonna email her. I was like, "Are you doing a talk?" Now I'm really gonna email her.
Yeah, she's one of our mentors on the grant, and yes, she's amazing too. So we're excited to have her on board.
Okay, cool. I'm about to call her.
Yes, please do.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. Bye, Lauren.
Bye.
Bye, Cynthia.
Bye.
Hope you're doing well.
Yes, I am. See you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Okay.
How many people did the post test?
Oh, I didn't look.
Okay. You got quite a few on the pre. That's pretty